Let's talk about Harambe.
The metrics on Harambe are undeniably unique in the history of digital culture.
Unprecedented.
Let's ground this in the historical sources first. Harambe was a living 450-pound silverback gorilla residing at the Cincinnati Zoo.
Right.
In May 2016, a young child breached the enclosure and fell into the habitat. As the situation rapidly escalated, zoo officials made the fatal decision to shoot Harambe to secure the safety of the child.
And I want to be incredibly clear to everyone listening to this deep dive. We are looking strictly at the mechanics of the cultural fallout here.
Yes.
We are not taking sides. We are not legislating the agonizing ethics of zoo management protocols or the specific decisions made that day.
It's important to separate the real tragedy from what the internet did with it.
Exactly. We are analyzing what the internet did with that event, because what followed was just unlike anything in modern history.
The immediate aftermath saw legitimate, heated debates regarding animal captivity and ethical oversight. But that discourse was rapidly eclipsed by an unprecedented, sprawling internet meme movement.
It took over everything.
It really did. Harambe's image and name were detached from the reality of the biological animal and repurposed into this ubiquitous cultural cipher.
Yeah, he became a symbol.
The scale of this digital tribalism was so immense that there were widespread reports of individuals writing in Harambe's name during actual national political elections later that year.
Which is honestly terrifying when you look back at it. The scale of it. He completely transcended his own existence. He stopped being a gorilla and became a universal punchline, a protest vote, a symbol of everything and nothing all at once.
He was a blank canvas for the internet's mood.
Right. But I think this is where Punch presents a fascinating counter-argument in our battle here. Because Harambe's cultural permanence is entirely anchored to tragedy and controversy.
Yes.
His legacy is permanently soaked in a very specific, cynical brand of 2016 internet irony.
You've identified the core divergence between the two perfectly. Harambe was absorbed by a digital culture that was heavily steeped in nihilism.
2016 was a weird time.
It was. The internet was becoming aggressively chaotic and divisive. The memification of Harambe was, in many ways, a collective coping mechanism.
Interesting.
Taking a sudden, tragic loss of life and processing it through layers of bizarre, absurdist irony was a way for a very cynical internet to distance itself from genuine grief.
So we made jokes so we wouldn't have to be sad.
Exactly. Harambe became a monument to a culture that didn't know how to process its own chaotic environment earnestly.
But doesn't that prove Harambe's superiority as a cultural icon?
How do you mean?
Well, irony is sticky. It survives. People are still making references to him a decade later.
That's true.
Punch is wholesome, and the wholesome content on the internet usually has a half-life of about 3 days before the algorithm churns it out for the next cute animal. I'm playing devil's advocate here, but isn't earnestness fundamentally weaker than controversy when it comes to holding global attention?
In a vacuum, perhaps, but attention economies are cyclical. What's fascinating here is how the internet uses animals as mirrors for our collective cultural mood. The intense popularity of Punch in 2026 suggests a profound collective fatigue with that exact cynical irony you're describing.
We're tired of the memes.
We are exhausted. We have spent a decade processing tragedies through memes. The data suggests audiences are actively rejecting the chaotic nihilism that fueled Harambe's virality.
You want something real.
Yes. Punch is not an empty vessel for projection. He is an active protagonist in a survival story. People aren't mourning an abrupt ending. They are actively investing in a fragile beginning.
Oh, wow. So you're saying Punch is basically the antidote to the Harambe hangover.
Essentially, yes. The mechanics of Harambe's fame relied on retrospective irony. The mechanics of Punch's fame rely on prospective hope.
Prospective hope. I like that.
When the Ichikawa City Zoo posts an update of Punch trying to socialize with another baby macaque, the suspense isn't manufactured for a joke. The stakes are biological and they are real.
We want to see him succeed.
Right. The engagement isn't cynical detachment. It's radical empathy.
That distinction really lands for me. Harambe was a static image we endlessly remixed to express our own frustration. Punch is a living narrative we are following because we desperately want to see him win.
It's a shift in how we build communities online.
It feels like a massive shift from digital vandalism to digital community building.
It is a much healthier reflection of our collective psychological state. If the primate icons we elevate act as mirrors, Harambe reflected an era that was deeply fractured. Punch reflects an era that is exhausted and simply wants to nurture something back to health.
Okay, but see, both Kong and Harambe represent these massive chaotic forces. One was a fictional engine of destruction. The other was a tragic catalyst for digital chaos.
Right, very chaotic energy.
What happens when the primate in question isn't a symbol of raw force, but a pioneer of profound intellect?
Ah, a different kind of legend.
Exactly. Because I want to pivot hard into the scientific realm for this next round. I want to look at Koko.
This is where the comparative analysis requires immense rigor. The scientific legacy of Koko is foundational to modern cognitive ethology.
She is a towering figure in science. She wasn't just a subject, she was a celebrity.
A global icon.
She was on the cover of National Geographic twice. She hung out with Robin Williams, Mr. Rogers, Flea from the Red Hot Chili
The
Peppers.
surreal guest list.
Completely surreal. And she notoriously raised her own pet kittens. She actively bridged the gap between species in a way that feels almost mythical.
The historical sources detail an extraordinary life. Koko, a female western lowland gorilla, lived from 1971 to 2018.
A long life.
Over those decades, Dr. Francine Patterson and her team dedicated themselves to a long-term cross-species communication project.
Right.
Koko became globally recognized for mastering an estimated 2,000 signs in a modified version of American Sign Language.
2,000 signs.
Yes, and crucial to her fame was the assertion that this wasn't mere operant conditioning. She wasn't just mimicking gestures for a food reward.
She actually understood.
Researchers documented her combining signs to express complex novel concepts, articulating emotional states, and demonstrating a profound capacity for grief.
Like with her kitten.
Most notably, mourning the sudden death of her kitten, All Ball, yes. She forced the scientific community to fundamentally reassess the inner cognitive lives of great apes.
She proved that the wall between us and them isn't solid, it's permeable. And that is a staggering achievement.
Undeniably.
But I have to look at the mechanics of how she achieved that fame. Koko's status was built over decades of grueling, daily, heavily funded scientific intervention.
It was a massive undertaking.
It required researchers with clipboards translating her every move. Punch achieved a comparable level of global emotional resonance in a matter of weeks, and he did it with zero training.
Nothing but instincts.
No signs, no semantic debates, no scientists, just a desperate baby holding a plushie.
It forces us to examine the barrier to entry for human empathy.
Tell me more about that.
Well, with Koko, she bridged the gap by stepping into our territory. She learned a human-constructed symbolic language.
She just learned ASL.
The reason she captured the global imagination is that she demonstrated intelligence on our terms. We respected her because she acted in certain heavily curated ways, like us.
That's a really good point.
Punch achieves a profound connection through an entirely different neurological pathway. He doesn't use our language. He forces us to understand his.
Which is?
The universal primal language of mammalian fear and the instinctual drive to seek comfort.
Okay, but honestly, isn't mastering 2,000 signs objectively more impressive for the history books than just hugging a stuffed orangutan? I am completely pushing back on this one.
I expected you might.
Koko shifted paradigms in academic literature. She prompted philosophical debates about personhood. Punch is incredibly cute and his story is heartbreaking, but does a biological impulse to hug a toy genuinely rival 50 years of rigorous cognitive research?
If we are measuring intellectual capability or contributions to ethological literature, Koko is entirely peerless. Punch is not reshaping our understanding of primate neuroscience.
Right.
But our deep dive is evaluating the mechanics of global fame, how an entity captures and holds the human heart. And in that arena, Punch's emotional efficiency is far superior.
How you figure?
Think about the neurological processing required. To appreciate Koko, you have to engage your prefrontal cortex.
The thinking part of the brain.
Yes. You have to understand the concept of sign language, you have to trust the researcher's translations, and you have to intellectually process the marvel of a gorilla understanding syntax.
It takes work to understand it.
Exactly. It is a highly mediated experience. Punch bypasses the intellect entirely. When you see an orphan infant clinging to an inanimate object because it lacks a mother, you don't need a PhD in primatology to decode the behavior.
You just feel it.
The barrier to empathy is non-existent. Koko had to prove her worth by being a genius. Punch proves his worth simply by being vulnerable.
Wow, that is a brutal but brilliant framing. Koko had to work for decades to prove she deserved to be understood. Punch just existed in a state of pain, and the entire world instantly understood him.
It really highlights how much easier it is to connect through shared trauma or vulnerability than through shared intellect.
Because we don't all know sign language. But every single human being has a cellular memory of what it feels like to be small, terrified, and desperate for something to hold on to.
Exactly. Koko engaged our minds in the hope of reaching our hearts. Punch goes straight for the amygdala.
Straight for the feelings.
It is a democratization of empathy. He doesn't require translation, which allows his story to cross cultural and linguistic boundaries instantly across the digital sphere.
You talk about these biological hacks and bypassing the intellect, which sounds suspiciously like another form of engineering.
It's biological programming, sure.